This is the
Five Stars
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? It is Monday, October 11th, 2021, and you're currently tuned into the Five Starr Wrestling Report podcast. If it's your first time checking out the show, welcome aboard. Hopefully you enjoyed the show and you wind up sticking around for future content. We got 2 weekly podcast shows here on YouTube. Got the Monday show where we recap and review AEW Rampage, NWA Powerrr, and as of right now, we're throwing in the G1 coverage for both shows. Although once that show wraps up in the next couple weeks, I will probably be going back to the old format of using the Monday show to cover weekend events, pay-per-views, news articles, and the sort. In addition to the G1 coverage, on Friday shows, we also recap NXT TV and AEW Dynamite. So we're pretty much all over the map with wrestling content here. You got AEW, WWE, NXT, New Japan, and the NWA. And little side nugget here, but the reason I like covering things like New Japan and the NWA is, not a lot of people are really talking about those shows right now, so kind of feel I'm doing my part by going out there and trying to support these companies and showing my support for the shows. You're seeing is how I genuinely enjoy the content they produce. Kind of like how people have their niche products that they enjoy in the independent market. In addition to watching the show here on YouTube, you guys can also find me on Rumble. I will always leave a link in the description below for you to click and check me out over there. And also, if you have not done so already, go over to the Chairshot. That's www.chairshot.com, and check out my article content over there. If you go over to the website, click under the opinion tab, you will find a good chunk of my article content under the name Star. I do opinion articles and opinion pieces each week for the site on various news topics. If it's something you're interested in and you want to check it out, you can always click the link to my most recent publication in the description, and it'll take you right over to the site so you can get a sample of what I'm writing. Anyway, with the plugs out of the way there, let's get into the shows this week. And last thing too, I didn't mention this yet. Guys, make sure you subscribe, comment, and rate this video. Just do me a favor and help grow this channel. I know subscriptions don't mean a whole lot anymore on YouTube, but you can show your support by giving this video a like and leaving a comment down below to, show your support. Greatly appreciate that. Anyway, it's Friday night, and you know what that means. That's right. Time to bitch about some wrestling. Well, mildly speaking. Major Pro right out of the gate. No Orange Cassidy or Matt Hardy. So the show already looked more promising on paper than last week. We did have Jericho on commentary, though, which made for a rather unpleasant viewing experience. Anyway, the opener was CM Punk versus Daniel Garcia. And they did the Mark Henry interview deal beforehand, which is fine. I did kind of get a chuckle later on in the match when Jericho joked about Punk taking out Matt Lee, who he referred to as Squarehead. Has Jericho seen Taz? I think I've seen refrigerators with more curvature to them. Anywho, this actually kind of reminded me of a lot of the Okada matches I've been watching in the G1. Now, hear me out for a minute. It was a longer match here, but I would say like the first 2/3 were all right, and the last 5 minutes were pretty good. I didn't hate anything they did early on, but I guess to put it bluntly, I was just kind of bored. And sometimes it's just kind of the nature of the business when you're watching longer matches in pro wrestling. If you want the layout to make sense, if you want guys to be able to preserve their stamina for longer periods of time, you got to be able to do the slow burn and build momentum as the match goes along. I know that might not translate over to AEW crowds very well, but I was okay with it. And I like Garcia's work, man. He's he kind of has that Zack Sabre Jr. Roderick Strong cross appeal for me, where he's a smaller guy, probably a little lacking in the personality department, but he's a very solid worker. I love watching his chain wrestling. He looks legit. He carries himself legit. I take him seriously. Of course, if he bulked up a little bit, it'd probably be even better. But, when I look at the overall roster right now, particularly some of the greener and the newer guys that they're lining up, Garcia is definitely a guy to keep an eye on. And he and Punk work fine together. They got the heat deal right before the break where the Never Rise Dorks rammed Punk's knee into the post behind the ref's back. Garcia ended up working that over for a while. Punk eventually milked a big comeback toward the end. Definitely looked a little gassed there by the end, but endurance doesn't come naturally, and 7 years of not doing this full time is pretty substantial. Obviously, Punk winning was predictable as all hell, but the important thing is Garcia looked good here. My only major gripe here was the only thing that really came out of this, which was followed up in the next segment, is that Punk is apparently going to be working a TV match on Rampage next week against Matt Sydal, of all people. Not that I have anything against Sydal, but shouldn't we be trying to build something for Punk at Full Gear? We're like 3 weeks out, guys. Kind of getting down to crunch time here. And speaking of that weird skit with Dante Martin, Matt Sydal, and Lio Rush, I had no idea what was going on here. Something about Rush offering Dante his services and Matt doesn't trust him or something like that. I don't know. Are they really going to tease a Dante Martin heel turn when he's actually getting over with the crowd? Sounds like Tony's been on the phone with Vince lately. Hey, pal, what's that? The crowd likes Dante Martin. Well, let's stick it to them and we'll turn him heel. 'Cause that's what the fans really want. The Acclaimed versus the Lucha Bros for the tag titles. Yeah, just in case you forgot, the Lucha Bros are still the champions. Wouldn't blame you if you forgot about that. The match existed. Only went like 5 minutes, so there really wasn't even a whole lot to note about it. It's a Lucha Bros match, so you pretty much know what you're getting at this point. They retained. Don't really have anything else to say about it. Jade Cargill wrestled Sky Blue. End of sentence. And in the main event of the night, it was Brian Cage and Ricky Starks in a Philly street fight for the FTW title. By the way, I went into a pretty lengthy description about the whole TBS title on Friday and kind of how I thought it really would have benefited to have it in the men's division as like a third-tier title. Is the FTW title actually recognized as a real championship in AEW? I'm legitimately curious about that. Ideally, the FTW title should be AEW's undercard championship, but I never really get the impression that the belt is treated as anything other than like an accessory or a prop. Didn't it just kind of show up on AEW without any fanfare? Regardless, I really didn't have too many thoughts about this. It was every cut and paste garbage street fight you've seen in the last 20 or 25 years. pretty much the whole deal was Ricky would just hit Cage with a bunch of shit and Cage would kick out. And it actually led to a pretty bad moment here where Ricky threw a mini tantrum and started wailing away on Cage with a pipe. And because Cage had his back turned, I don't know if he just forgot that this was a spot, if Ricky improvised here with the pipe, but Cage did not sell the shots at all. And beyond it looking fake, it also made for a pretty bad television moment. Just something I picked up on. Anyway, Hook and Hobbs ended up doing a run-in at the end after Taz summoned the clowns, which then I immediately thought, why didn't they just run out from the beginning if it's no DQ? Didn't think that one through. And after Cage tried to fend off the 3-on-1 beatdown, he ended up scaling the turnbuckle to try and suplex Hobbs, I guess, back into the ring, which made no sense. But Hook low-blowed him from behind, and then Ricky came in, picked up Cage onto his shoulders, and put him away with whatever they called that move, Rochambeau, something like that. Not my flavor of match. At least they kept the stupidity to moderation here and didn't try any corkscrew somersault planches through fucking barbed wire or anything. Ricky's still incredibly underutilized in this company, but I've been preaching that same song and dance for as long as I can remember. And the best part of this match by a country mile was Taz. He literally has the best reactions anytime his team is in peril. Brian Cage just doesn't really do it for me, and I don't think most people would argue that. He's got a jacked physique, and he's a good athlete for his size, but beyond that, there's really nothing there. The crowd doesn't care about him. I don't think he has the tools or charisma right now to be able to turn the fans in his favor, so he's kind of at a dead end right now. I don't really know what the plan is for Team Taz going forward either. I mean, the CM Punk feud was pretty much blown off unless they still want to do Ricky Starks and CM Punk, which I'd totally be down for. And I don't think Brian Cage has enough traction to warrant another match with anybody on Team Taz. So we'll see where they want to go. Overall, I categorize this show probably somewhere around average. Not a bad show, but pretty middle of the road in terms of material. I'm still fairly concerned about the Full Gear card, but for following the formula they used for All Out last month, they probably won't announce anything until basically the week prior. I don't agree with it, but ticket sales have apparently been pretty strong for the show, and I think anyone that's either going to the show or plan on streaming it have already made their minds up. So, if there is a subset of people out there that are still weighing their options for whether or not they want to pay for the show, it's probably very minute at this point. And transitioning over to, well, definitely the polar opposite of AEW Rampage, that's for sure. We began the show with Kyle Davis interviewing Camille at the podium. And she didn't really say all that much. She talked briefly about the confliction going on with Strictly Business. And boy, was that an understatement by the end of the show. And then she ran down the whole deal with Melina. Basically called her old, and when they do end up getting in the ring, she's going to expose her and break all her bones. I actually don't know how old Melina is off the top of my head, but God, she's been around for a long time. I remember watching her, back in 2004, 2005? Whenever they were doing the whole Eminem deal in WWE. That's my earliest memory of her. God, and I would think I was in grade school at that point. Either that or middle school. Whew, it's crazy. I definitely think Camille's getting better at promos.
That's it. What about everything we talked about?
Well, I get a little nervous. I'm getting better.
You can definitely tell, though, that these really just don't come naturally to her, but That's cool. As long as she's doing the work and putting in the effort to get better at it, I'm not going to shit on it. That eventually brought out Trevor Murdoch and Pope to do individual promos, and God, man, it's incredible to me just how much Pope never ages. He's still pimping just like he was 10 years ago. Anyway, Trevor basically called Jax Dane a bitch and told him to challenge him for the world title like a man. And Pope... No, he did a Pope promo. Don't really remember a whole lot of what he said, but boy, is he a bubble of charisma. So we get this tag team Lucha Rolls Scramble elimination match thing. It was La Rebellion, Marche Rocket, and Slice Boogie in the Ill Begotten. Basically, the rules work through single elimination, so you basically have to pin or submit both members of each team before they're out of the match. This is pretty fun, controlled, chaotic match, I would call it. And by that, it was move-centric, but, it at least made sense in terms of the way they laid it out. Pretty much the story was one guy from each team got eliminated at various points throughout, including Bestia, who I think was like the second or third guy to get pinned. Just kind of randomly happened, which was odd. Really don't have any complaints about anything they did. There was the one spot I always hate where a guy does a dive and, everyone has to gather around in a giant cluster to catch the guy. Always looks totally fake and overly cooperative, but, at least we only saw it once here as opposed to like 7 or 8 times in one match. It ended up coming down to Marche Rocket and Mecha Wolf. It went back and forth for a little bit, a couple brief 1-2 exchanges, and Mecha ended up getting a backdrop on Rocket, goes up top and hits a 450 splash to pick up the win and retain the belts for his team. It was kind of weird in the sense that they're already doing a tournament to find number 1 contenders for the belts, and all the while here they just do a random 3-way with 2 of the teams that I think were already eliminated from the tournament, right? So why are they getting a title shot? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but fun match. Crowd enjoyed it. Following this, we had Aaron Stevens and Kratos doing a promo. More of the deal they were building up a few weeks back where Kratos wants Aaron to release the Kraken, so to speak. I missed my opportunity to do it in a Scottish accent. Release the Kraken. Anyway, I'm usually never a big fan of the tag partners that don't get along deal, but at least this duo isn't getting into physical altercations every week. They're at least trying to build up a story with it, so that's good. Then we had Judas versus Cowboy James Storm in a rematch from whatever in the hell last week's match was supposed to be. By the way, I think it was at this point in the episode where the Velvet Sky Austin Idol arguing on commentary really started to get under my skin. I had no idea what they were arguing about, what the story was behind it. All I know is that it was incredibly annoying. Anyway, this was better than last time, I'll give it that. At least we got a clean winner here. Judas is pretty bland, if I'm being honest. He's not a particularly compelling character. His wrestling's kind of substandard, and I just don't really get the sense that if you took James Mitchell out of the equation that he'd be able to stand out on his own. Judas worked him over for a while, kind of worked over Storm's ankle briefly, did some facial grabbings, and Judas goes to pick up Storm for the Razor's Edge, but Storm powered out, hit the last call shot, and got the win. It was a match. Nothing else to really add beyond what I just mentioned. Although I could probably go on a 10-minute tirade about how underappreciated James Storm is if I really wanted to, but ship sailed on that about 10 years ago, if I'm being honest. Okay, I'll admit, I actually thoroughly enjoyed this next women's segment, and I think Kylie Rae's growing on me. her promo was so ungodly awkward, but I think whereas Taryn Terrell is just ear-piercingly awful to listen to, Kylie's promos at least have some comical relief to it. So, she was supposed to wrestle Lady Frost, but the Hex came out, and Allison Kay got into a verbal spiel with Lady Frost about her interfering in the match last week, that whole deal. They all kind of shot the shit for a while. Allison eventually calls out Lady Frost to a match. Kylie jumps in and she's all like, well, what about me? Which again, I laughed just out of the sheer lunacy of the whole matter. And there's like a really long pause. Everyone's just kind of waiting around in silence, wondering what to do. And finally, Mae Valentine's like, so what are we doing, guys? And then Kylie goes, let's do a triple threat. So I guess Marty was invisible here. But the three-way was actually not half bad. Yeah, they did a lot of the usual formatting tropes we see in multi-person matches where someone gets taken out and they all just kind of exchange one-on-one moves in the ring for a little bit. But everyone worked hard. Nothing looked overly botched or messy. I really like the finish, too. Kind of a clever idea. Lady Frost tries to scale the turnbuckle with her back turned to Allison and Kylie, but Kylie cuts off Allison with a super kick. Allison inadvertently falls into the ropes and knocks Lady Frost down. And then Kylie locked in the crossface on Lady Frost and got the immediate tap out. Like I mentioned at the beginning, the only thing I really hated about this was the commentary. Hope to God they never put Idol back at the desk again, because fuck, he was intolerable. We then had, well, we were supposed to have an interview with PJ and Lou Cox and Sal Renaro and Mims, but basically Tyrus came out and completely took control of the promo. That was probably better off. And covered a lot of ground here, most of which I'm totally blanking on now. He spent most of the promo trash talking the fans, making fun of Missouri. I did get a kick out of the line where he goes, I thought Missouri was a red state. But he's still moving along with that whole Scion dude. Or I should say moving the story along with him. And apparently he's defending his TV title soon, since people, I guess, are complaining that he hasn't been defending it. I mean, truth be told, I totally forgot he was the TV champion. Like, I know he carries it with him everywhere he goes, including his Fox segments with Greg Gutfeld and the bunch, but maybe it would be nice to see him defend it on the show once or twice a month. I mean, it is the TV title, right? And that brought us to our main event of Chris Adonis and Tom Latimer versus Tim Storm and Nick Aldis. Kind of rushing into things here with strictly business dissension, aren't we? Well, I'll get to that more in depth when we get to the afterbirth. Very old school TV main event match, but it was enjoyable. Faces controlled the action early. Tim Storm got cut off and worked over for a little bit. Aldis eventually got the hot tag and ran wild toward the end. They had things break down for a minute with Adonis and Storm on the outside. Latimer tried to hoist up Aldis onto his shoulders for, I guess, an electric chair, but Aldis reversed it with the O'Connor roll and picked up the win. And then we get to the post-match angle with everyone teasing the mutual respect and sportsmanship. They all shake hands. Storm goes to hug Latimer. And that is when Adonis runs in and low blows Storm from behind. Aldis gets into a shoving match with Adonis temporarily. And that is when Latimer groin shots Adonis, sends him crumbling to the mat in a heap. And the heels put the boots to the faces. Latimer brings in the chair and starts wailing away. Ends up hitting a series of pile drivers onto Aldis, including one on the chair. And they did the stretcher job to close out the show. Hideous acting from Velvet, by the way, which almost kind of ruined the whole deal. But it was a good, somber angle to close out the show. SB turns on Aldis, and yeah, it came right the fuck out of nowhere. I mean, they really only started teasing dissension a week ago, and And like the very next show, they're already laying each other out and putting one another on the shelf. So, kind of seemed rushed, but looking past that, the execution of the angle was really well done. The Latimer Aldis story has been done before in TNA, but I mean, let's be honest, that story always sucked from the beginning. At least this one comes across more authentic and real than it did 5 or 6 years ago. I would kind of expect Aldis to be out for a pretty substantial amount of time to sell the injury, which probably means they won't book his return for the upcoming pay-per-view. Well, at least I wouldn't book it that soon, but we'll see what they want to do. Hell of an episode, though. Certainly more newsworthy than last week. I definitely enjoyed it more than Rampage, if I'm being frank. They packed a lot into the hour, but it was a fun hour to watch. And they got some interesting things going on with the main event picture right now. Considering Jax Dane is already scheduled to face Crimson in the cage match, I presume they're going to do Pope and Trevor for the belt at the October pay-per-view later this month, which should be good. The mid-card scene is still kind of hit and miss for me, but I'm at least familiarized with some of these newer talents that I haven't gotten much exposure to, but yeah, very good show this week. And definitely looking forward to seeing what they plan for the pay-per-view card, whatever it's called. Any means necessary, by any means necessary, something like that. All right, let's get into some G1 coverage. Night 12 took place on October 8th, and we were back around to the B block. So we began with Yoshihashi versus Tama Tonga. By the way, small side note here, but I think I heard Kelly mention during the entrances that in addition to Goto, Yoshihashi is also statistically eliminated from the G1 entirely now. And, if you've watched this tournament, this is usually around the point where you start weeding out guys that are toward the bottom of the block in terms of point accumulation. Pretty uneventful match, not a whole lot to report on, which is kind of funny because right when I started to think, man, this is kind of dull, Kevin Kelly immediately goes, oh man, what a great match. Apparently we were watching two different things. Yoshihashi ended up going over with Karma, which, doesn't really mean anything at this point, but a win's a win, I guess. Again, not that it really matters. Up next was Chase Owens versus Hiroki Goto. Again, like I mentioned in the previous match, Goto's mathematically out, so the implications here really kind of hung on Chase going over, which, well, I'll cover in a minute. As a match, it was there. Chase kind of ran wild early to try and get the early jump, but didn't really go anywhere beyond that. Lots of teasing of the package pile driver here and there, but Goto would usually find a way to reverse it. It all ended up boiling down to Chase going for one last pile driver attempt, but Goto countered it into the GTR and picked up the win. And again, weird decision having Goto go over. For one, him picking up points now makes absolutely no difference. It's kind of weird that they had Chase go over Tanahashi after, falling short in the first few tournament matches, only to then turn around and immediately job him out again. I really don't know what they're going for there. And I still wasn't really sold on either guy going in, so yeah, 2 matches in a row with wacky finishes that really didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Then we had Jeff Cobb versus Sonata. Of course, the big story they're running with right now is Cobb remaining undefeated in competition, and I think him going up against... who does he have left? Besides Okada, which I think is the finals match. I think it's just Evil and Tanahashi, right? So, yeah, that'll kind of be the big selling point with his final series of matches, to see, whether or not he ends up running through Evil and Tanahashi before going up against Okada. Anyway, decent match, I thought. Yeah, they tried to do some flash pins and signature teasers to paint the visual of Cobb losing, but I don't think most people presumed he wasn't going over in the end. Obviously, and I know I've said this like 100 times already, but big dudes picking up and throwing around other dudes never gets old. And I'm definitely starting to see a lot more of Cobb's personality come through. You can definitely tell he's a lot more comfortable in his role than he was even 2 years ago when I was watching him. Probably helps that they're actually booking him to go over instead of making him a jag like he was in the G1 in 2019. But like I said, Sonata got a couple visual pins on Cobb, and other than that, pretty standard match. Finish was really impressive, though. Catching Sonata off that moonsault attempt and countering it into a Tour of the Islands. It was impressive. Like I said, I think the real selling point for Cobb going forward is seeing what they do with him against Evil and Tanahashi. I would hope they would keep Cobb undefeated until he gets to Okada, but we'll see what they want to do. If they did something as lame as just having Cobb get punked out by Evil and Bullet Club, I just fucking roll my eyes at that. But again, a wait and see process. Semi-main for the night was Evil versus Hiroshi Tanahashi. Speaking of eye rollers, and there's only so many ways I can regurgitate it's a Bullet Club match. And as good as Tanahashi is, he's not fucking God either. Pretty much whole match was Tanahashi fighting underneath, trying to fend off all Dick Togo's interference, which got old real quick here. Especially when you factor in that this is the semi-main, and you'd really hope they would, try to hold back on the run-ins and, I don't know, not overcomplicate things, but I'm not booking the shit. I'm just here to complain about it. Finishing sequence eventually led to Tanahashi getting Evil to tap out in the cloverleaf hold, but Togo had the ref. They did a bunch of low blow shenanigans and led to probably the most anticlimactic finish you could possibly imagine. And I really don't even know how to comment on that finish. I mean, I may be too kind by saying it was flat. Evil gives him a belt shot, hits everything as Evil. He stumbles over to snag the ref by the collar, throws him down in front, and, even Kelly just sounded so drained calling that 1, 2, 3. I mean, I get he's working the crowd, but you can even tell Kelly's probably thinking in the back of his head, jeez, another fucked finish. Can't we think of anything more clever? Match was what it was. If you can stomach the excessive Bullet Club garbage, you probably might have enjoyed it a little bit, but I've just seen so much of this from both blocks at this point, in such a short time span, too. I'm totally over it by now. And I can imagine that anybody that follows New Japan long-term has been sick of it for years. Anyway, that brought us to the main event for the night, Taichi versus Kazuchika Okada. And at this point in the show, I was actually kind of oscillating back and forth with both scouting the match and trying to fix my Google Chrome issues of not being able to open particular sites because of certificate expirations and all that techie stuff. I ended up resolving the issue. And coincidentally enough, I ended up solving it right as we got down to the last few minutes of the match, which then I realized that whole process took me over 30 minutes to solve, which was ridiculous. Anyway, from what I was paying attention to, it kind of looked like a pretty standard Okada match to me. They ended up breaking down a lot of counters, especially by the end there, which is usually hit and miss with me depending on the excessiveness and believability. From what I remember, it didn't look like either guy was really working a body part consistently, so if they were going to do the spot exchange deal, I was at least glad they weren't breaking into the no-sell injury deal that I'm so accustomed to seeing. Finishing deal was Okada going over with the Rainmaker shortly before the 25-minute mark. Like I said, I was trying to multitask a lot here, so there were portions of this match where it did not have my undivided attention, but judging how a lot of Okada's matches go, I don't really think I missed a whole lot in the middle there. Another pretty stale show from the B block. And that's really weird to me because, when you actually analyze the talent pool for both blocks, the B block looks more stacked than the A block. course, they got fucking Toriano over there. But I really have not been all that impressed with the B block these last several shows. Jeff Cobb's been the only real highlight, and even his matches aren't really breaking down any barriers right now. It's just fun watching him barrel through guys and win. Yeah, granted, we're still a few shows out from when the tournament usually starts to kick into that final gear, when things start to come to closure. And like I mentioned at the beginning, usually when you start mathematically eliminating guys from the equation, you start to care less about their matches, knowing that they don't really have any real consequence. So maybe that was just a bug too. Anyway, I ended up watching the A block the following night, which took place October 9th. And in a match that I absolutely could not pass up on watching, again, even though it was a prelim match that didn't tie into the tournament in any way, Hiromu Takahashi versus Tomohiro Ishii. Kelly actually had a funny line a few minutes into this match after Ishii basically floored Takahashi with a chop. He just goes, "I know what you're thinking. If I got chopped like that, I'd be dead." You're probably right. Challenge accepted, my friend. I need to call up Ishii and see if we can put this theory to the test. If I do not report back, well, you probably know what happened. Overall, I liked the match. I talked a little bit in the previous Takahashi match, but Kelly mentioned the rumblings on him eventually looking to enter the heavyweight division down the road, possibly including him in the G1 in future dates, so seeing him have a competitive match with Ishii here, it was good for him. Put him on the map. And he looked good. A lot of the match was back and forth with Takahashi getting in some visual pins. In fact, there was a period around the 15-minute mark where Ishii was actually fighting from underneath. And the finishing deal was Takahashi reversing the brainbuster into a small package for a near fall. Ishii fired back with a big lariat and ended up putting Takahashi away with the brainbuster on his second go-around. Takahashi needs to work on his selling a little bit, but other than that, good stuff here. Fun opener. The first actual tournament match on the show was Kenta and Zack Sabre Jr., and they kind of went with the back-and-forth story of Zack working over Kenta's leg earlier on, Kenta eventually firing back and working over Zack's lower back. They pretty much worked it as heel versus heel, too, which I think actually made the match a little more enjoyable. Because a lot of Zack's heel work is usually boiled down to him doing things like challenging someone to either kick or strike him. And because his specialty is mostly mat work and sub holds, he ends up getting his ass kicked whenever he challenges guys to striking contests. And definitely played off better in the Ibushi match, but Kenta firing back on him was pretty entertaining too. I love the concept of all of Zack's transitory submission holds. Like a guy tries to counter the hold and Zack's like, "All right, I'll just put you in another hold." Guy tries to reverse it out again. Zack's like, "All right, I'll put you in this hold." Guy tries to reach for the rope. Zack's like, fuck you. Give me your arm so I can modify this hold into this hold. And he's so smooth with everything, too. It's just like, you don't see this kind of wrestling on mainstream TV. I really wish more guys would do this instead of trying to fucking pop the crowd every 30 seconds. Anyway, this ended up trickling down to Zack trapping Kenta in the ankle lock momentarily. But Kenta ended up reversing it and sending Zack face first into the exposed buckle. Kenta hoists up Zack onto his shoulders and hits the GTS for the 3. Another very good match, though. They went a little over 20 minutes, but it never felt like it dragged at any point either, which is definitely a positive. Zack's been pretty consistent with having good G1 matches so far. Kenta has kind of been hit and miss for me. A lot of that's the fault of all the Bullet Club BS, which thankfully they kept to a bare minimum here, but I thought both guys had a really decent showing. It almost made up for this Toriano Yujiro Takahashi match. Pretty much take whatever I said about the limiting of the BS in the previous match and crank that up to about 100. That's what we got here in terms of this Yanu garbage match. We had tape, we had removing of the turnbuckle pads, we had low blows, we had the whole kit and caboodle here, folks. And we Also had the incredibly ridiculous finish of both guys just disappearing under the ring for a while, which is probably the best part of the match, by the way. And somehow when both guys rolled out, Yujiro ended up with his hands tied behind his back, which was beyond stupid. Sucked. And by the way, think about this for a minute. Zack gets launched into the exposed buckle one time and gets pinned like a dweeb, but Yano gets driven into 2 or 3 turnbuckle throws, and he kicks out at 2. And Yano doesn't get a pass either for having one nice belly-to-belly throw at one point. Moving on. Oh, and Yano won, by the way, just in case you could possibly give a fuck. Tama Tonga versus Shingo Takagi was the semi-main. No, that's not right. Why did I write Tama Tonga? I meant Tonga Loa. Anyway, I really kind of went back and forth on this one for a while. Certainly not a bad match. I thought it was odd that Tonga controlled as much offense as he did. He did hit a sick-looking top rope power slam from his shoulders, and he was definitely breaking out some more things in his offensive arsenal that I haven't seen before. But generally, I don't even know how to put it. Tonga Loa is not bad. He's just not all that exciting, I guess. Like, I watch a Tama Tonga match, and I immediately see potential in him as a singles guy. Tonga is just kind of there. And, you know, sometimes it's just how the formula goes with tag teams. Put them together, they're a well-oiled machine and are super fun to watch. Break them apart, have them do their own thing. One usually sinks, the other swims. Obviously, you have exceptions to those kinds of rules, but, you know, by and large, it's usually the one guy that comes out of the duo with a championship or someone that they build up as a main event guy, and then the other one just kind of dwindles in the mid-card and really just isn't all that special on his own. It was a weird match from bell to bell, though. Shingo's the IWGP champion, and I'm sitting there watching him take like 70% of the match, just thinking, why is the top champion selling so much for this Tonga Loa guy? Just felt really odd to do. Shingo eventually won after hitting Tonga with a pumping bomber, followed by Last of the Dragon. And I don't think I ever really doubted the finish, but I mean, this one was approaching the 20-minute mark before Shingo put him away, and I just don't really see why it was warranted to go that long. I guess they were trying to kill time to make up for that Toru Yano abomination they called a match. And that brought us to the main event of the Great Okan versus Kota Ibushi. And another match that I really kind of struggled to break down. They spent a long time on the mat with chain work and the whole feeling out process. And pretty much half the match, if we're going by time standards. But it was so different from so much of what I've seen in the tournament, you know, even taking into account all of Zack Saber's matches. I mean, I didn't hate it. Especially toward the halfway mark when they really started laying into each other and going for more vicious strikes. I think it really picked up in terms of intensity. You know, factor in the little bit of juice we got with Khan's busted nose. Made for a big fight feel. But they kind of worked the story like Okan was doing all he could to keep Ibushi grounded, you know, knowing that he was trying to avoid all of Ibushi's kick strikes and just try to keep him down. And for the most part, he kept him on the mat. You know, but once Ibushi started gaining traction and laying in with kicks and strikes, that's when the match pretty much turned in his favor. There was a real nasty spot toward the end where both guys just kind of ran at one another full speed. I think it was Ibushi that caught Okan with a knee to the face and just fucking dropped him. Looked absolutely disgusting. And at the end, Ibushi went for the Kamigoye, but Okan grabbed Ibushi's knee at first with the claw. Tried to hoist up Ibushi, but caught him with the other knee. And then Ibushi finally hit the Kamigoye after a second attempt to put away Okan, as I think most people anticipated. Like I said with Okan's previous match, I think we've reached the point now where he's probably just going to end up doing jobs for the remainder of the tournament, which is fine. I think the remaining hook for the A block right now is seeing what they do with Zach in the closing round matches. And overall, though, oh my God, it wasn't even close. Night 13 blew Night 12 out of the water in terms of match quality and just overall enjoyment level. I'd absolutely recommend you check out the Kenta Zack Sabre match. Even though it wasn't consequential to the G1, check out Ishii's match with Takahashi. And, I'll even say, if you have time, check out the main event with Ibushi and Okan. It's probably not the most exciting match from start to finish, but it was uniquely different. And if you watch all three matches, I would say you won't be that disappointed. You'll definitely notice a stark contrast with all three of those matches. So, yeah, definitely do yourself a favor and check out some of the stuff on Night 13, because it was a pretty entertaining show. Night 12, you can pretty much skip that show entirely. Guys, if you want to support the FSWR channel in the future, make sure you subscribe, comment, and rate the show for me. Again, that is 2 podcast shows a week we do here on YouTube and Rumble exclusively, Monday and Friday. Make sure you guys check out my Chairshot article content by heading over to www.chairshot.com. I'll also make sure I leave links for easy access down below. And I will be back on Friday for the NXT and Dynamite reports. And we'll keep cranking away from the G1 coverage as that starts to come to closure. Take care, all. Peace.